I will take questions for anyone who does show up. But in the primer for this, I had said that I was going to prime him in white. That didn't happen. I just happened to have a can of Army Painter Crystal Blue primer, which won't cause a problem for this guy. Oops, will not cause a problem for this guy because it's a lighter blue than his armor anyways, so it's about the same as white. The blues might actually cover a little bit better on this. But I'm going to do a few different techniques, a few different ways of painting him up. And we're going to start by showing you the basic base coat. And for that, I'm going to use Ultramarine Blue. This is Vallejo game color. Don't need a lot on your palette for this. And I'm just going to use a decent sized flat brush that's damp. And I'm going to paint a few different areas. Start his shoulder pad here. His helmet. And it's okay if it doesn't cover completely in the first pass, so you can always go over 2 times. And I'm also going to get this leg. I said, since I'm doing a few different techniques to show different ways for beginners, so that they can have different options for how they might want to try painting their models. I'm not going to do the entire thing, and different parts of them will be done in different ways. And he keeps wanting to fall. Now, if you want to use alternative colors from a different paint ranges, that is perfectly acceptable. There's no reason why you can't. If you're using Games Workshop paints, you can use McCrag Blue, I believe, is the base color for Ultramarines. If you're doing, I'm sure there are equivalents in Reaper, the Reaper paint ranges as well. But that's it for now. Give that a few seconds to dry. Okay. Now, one of the ways, and this is a really fast way, that you can highlight and do a decent highlight on something like this is you can dry brush and then do a wash. And I'm going to show you that first because I'm going to do these in certain steps to show you different ways to do it. Then since the next method after this is also going to be a wash before any highlighting, I'm going to do the dry brushing now and then a wash over the parts I just did, including the parts that I dry brush, and then I'll show you the next, and I'll show you the following method after that, and we'll just run into each other, and we'll work out pretty nicely. Okay, it's pretty dry now. Now, if you want to dry brush, there's a few different ways you can do this. You can go for a brighter color, like Magic Blue or Electric Blue. You also have the option of doing something like mixing a gray or a white, if you want to, into your base color. And that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix Stonewall Gray from Vallejo Game Color in with the Ultramarine blue, pardon me, already on my palette. I'm just going to use a spare brush that I have here to do that. Get a little bit wet, just to make it a little bit easier. And you As you can see, the blue is quite a bit brighter, and that's with the Stonewall Gray mixed in. Crimson Fist, if you're still here and wondering, the reason why I've bought a lot of miniatures cheap, and I've been playing miniature games for quite a long time, so that's the reason why I have so many miniatures. He had asked how many I had. I told him probably over 1,000 myself. So I'm going to pick up that color on a brush. It doesn't have to be a flat brush, but if it's a brush, make sure it's one that you don't care about being in good condition. And I'm going to wipe off most of that color into a tissue. Okay, there's not much left in there. It's almost bone dry. And I'm just going to show you. Dry brushing on the shoulder pad. You can come down and from side to side if you want. And it builds up color on that curve. This is a second-hand model that wasn't in great condition, so he's not in the best conditions. And show you on the leg as well. As you do it, you'll see it builds up color the more you go over it. And also by doing this, when you dry brush, you tend to only hit places that are more raised and more, as long as you're being careful and being gentle. Well, it depends. Depends, Crimson Fist, how cheap. You can check on eBay. eBay often has some really good deals if you're looking for cheap miniatures. Generally older ones. But it does work well for getting cheap minis. There is also always the option of looking up the Reaper Bones line of miniatures, because I'll show you for a second. That's what this griffin is made out of, or that's what this line this griffin is from. And you can see he's a pretty sizable model. Stick his wings in there. I might have his wings backwards. That might be a problem. Alright. Compared to the Ultramarine, he's pretty sizable. And this guy was only maybe $4 or $5. I do know they have a whole bunch of different miniatures in their line, so I don't know for absolutely certain if they have Luna Wolves or not. If you mean like the Space Marine chapter, no. But if they have like werewolves and stuff, I'm sure they have something equivalent. Might not be called a werewolf, but anyways. So that got built up. And I'm actually going to even take a little bit of that Stonewall Gray on its own. Work that into a slightly smaller dry brush. And scrub a little bit on the top there. Just give it a little bit extra highlight. Try to hit the tops and edges of a few places, just to give it a little bit more oomph. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. You don't need a lot. But you can see, if you can see it, it's kind of powdery looking, but that's okay because we're going to give it a wash and bring it back down. And for that, by the way, every time you start with a new paint, make sure you give it a good shake. Even these acrylic washes, give it a good shake. Make sure all the pigments and all mediums mix together real nicely. I'm going to use Citadel's Dragonhof Nightshade, and I'm going to cover everything here. So the head and the parts that I had just dry brushed. And I'm just going to use a decent sized brush. That's damp. I'm going to get some on my palette just to have a little bit more control. And I am going to start putting that Drakenhof Nightshade across the mini. Now, if you want, you can always choose, if you prefer, to paint it into the recesses, if you want. And always just do a little bit of cleanup, and that is your prerogative. You can do that if you want to do it. You don't have to. This overall wash is a little bit more difficult to control. You see I have to keep going back over it a few spots so it doesn't pool up too much. But you can also tell that it's getting in those recesses really nicely and darkening them quite a lot. Now I only use Drakenhof Nightshade because it might be what more people might recognize when they think of a wash or a shade. In this case, that's what GW and Citadel calls their line of washes. They call them shades, which is a perfectly acceptable term for what they're used for. They're used for shading. That's it. Now, they're going to tint everything, and there's nothing you can do to avoid that, but that's okay. And that's really all you need, and as long as you were careful not to let it pool too much anywhere. Like, there's a little bit right there I didn't want. But the places that you dry brushed, the places that were brighter because of the dry brushing, are going to be brought down to a darker blue. And then even deeper recesses are going to be a really dark blue because of the shade settling in them. So it smooths out that roughness and that chalkiness of the dry brush a bit. Okay. And for the areas in which you didn't do that, and like this one, it's just going to bring down and shade the recesses and bring down that ultramarine blue just a little bit. But that does need time to dry. And while that dries, I'm going to show you another technique. Okay? That technique is just going to be starting from a really dark color and building up. And again, since we're doing beginners, I'm not going to show you any major Hi Sparky, how are you doing? I am teaching right now, actually. And my next technique is going to be starting from a really dark color, basically your shade color, and building up to a brighter color. And I'm going to show you on this shoulder pad. And for this, I'm going to start with this Imperial Blue. It's a really nice dark blue. If you don't feel like it's dark enough, you can always try to see if you have a darker blue in your collection. Or another option is you could always add a little bit of black to it, but it's up to you. It's how you feel. But this is a pretty dark blue for what we're doing here. So I'm going to paint it on this guy. As you can see, it's a little streaky. That's mostly just because of the translucency of this particular color. It's just not the best covering paint. As you can see, it's a very nice, rich, deep blue color. It has a different tone than the ultramarine blue, I can tell you that. I'm teaching on here so people can ask questions of me and stuff like that if they feel like they want to. I'm also going to paint this down here, so maybe I can show you a little bit more. Don't be afraid while you're painting to experiment a little bit. Also, I mean, if your preference for ultramarines is you like this deeper blue color to start with, you can always start that with that as your base coat. You don't have to stick to traditional conventions, of course. Okay. That's probably going to need at least one more coat on both parts, at least. No, it's not that big a deal if we don't. But I'll show you the other way that I was doing with the shading on the other guy, since that is dry. Okay, I do need some more ultramarine blue because I used up what had been on my palette. To show you, I used up what had been on my palette to show you that last technique with the dry brushing. Now this is going to look a little bit cleaner, but it's going to be a little bit slower, especially if you're doing a whole model or a whole army. But you want a better brush for this one. So I have my Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 1 brush here. And what we're going to start doing is cleaning up all the areas that got darkened that we want to be ultramarine blue. Let's see, there's a little bit of shade there. That's not quite dry yet, but that's okay. We're not going to get close enough to that for it to matter. Now, just as long as you stay out of the recesses. Stay more in the middle and bring back that ultramarine blue color that you had before, you should be fine. Now, we're not going for any extremely smooth transitions or anything like that, because as I said, this is for beginners. So all you want to worry about is making it look clean for what you want to do. And as long as you're happy with it, then that's all that matters. And if you're a beginner, all you can really ask for is for it to look clean and to be happy with it. Okay. Now I know this ultramarine blue is actually kind of a dull blue by comparison. So, by the way, this is dry enough that for another layer, so I'm going to hit that real fast. Another layer of the imperial blue. It'll probably need just 3. It probably will need 3 layers. And yeah, I know I'm wiping off a little bit with my finger. Normally you're not jumping around like this when you're painting a model. But the intent here is to give you a whole bunch of different techniques. I'll give you different techniques that you can take away from this and apply what you think is best for you in whatever situation you need it in. Now, as I said, I know this ultramarine blue is more on the pale side, and that's okay. While this electric blue is more of an intense blue, it's still brighter, and it will work as a highlight. If you don't want to do that, you can always go back to mixing white or gray. into your ultramarine blue. Now you want to thin down with a little bit more water than you would with a little bit of extra water. That blue, that electric blue that I just put on my palette. And you want a little bit on your brush. And wipe off a little bit of extra so you don't have too much. And what we're going to do is called edge highlighting. So what you do, you find an edge, and in this case, I'm pulling the side of my brush. Because if you have a pronounced edge like you do at this ridge here, you can use the side of your brush to pick out the edge. As the brush will find it, and you don't have to worry. If you cannot reach a particular area, don't worry about it. Because if you can't reach it, then most people aren't going to see it. Okay. For areas like here, just be really careful. Try to use the tip of your brush. You want to do across the brow. And if you're a beginner, it's okay if it's a little bit on the thick side. Across the brow there. Another trick you could use, if you have drying retarder, you could use drying retarder to slow down the drying time. Go across the front here. Also keep in mind, as I said, if you don't like the way this looks, which is fine, it makes sense if you don't. It's not for everyone. Employ whatever other technique works best for you. And whatever color you want to use that works best for you. We're going to use a tip of a brush. Drag underneath the eye here. To highlight that as well. And down here. And up. Around the top of this. Down. Some people put a streak along the brow here if you want, along that edge, the top edge. So if you want to put one here along the edge of that shadow, you can do that if you want. Do it on the other side just to show again. Just follow along the edge of that shadow. Makes it pop a little bit. You can even do it across the brow here. And that'd be a edge highlight. And if you feel like there's anywhere that you made it too thick, or perhaps you're just not satisfied with how even the line is, you could always take ultramarine blue and even it out and thin the line. Like that. Come down there like that. Let's come up here. Just even it out. Just a little bit. And you can do this as many steps as you want, moving a little bit more towards the tops and towards the edges with the edge highlighting. I'm just showing you one step because that's the most basic, doing one step to it. Okay. All right. All right. Now the blue down there is fine. It's going to be fine. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with what I have. Now that's our shadow. And you could always mix colors together to do steps. What I mean by that is you can take your Imperial Blue and whatever your next color up is. It's going to be your Ultramarine Blue, or in this case I'm going to use Magic Blue. You can mix the two together. And you can make an in-between. And you can paint differently than this. Make an in-between color. Or make different amounts of the two. Make multiple in-between colors. If you want to. It's up to you. But in this case, I'm going to take the straight Magic Blue. And I'm going to cover most of the Imperial Blue. What I'm not going to cover is the deep recesses. So you're going to leave an outline of that really dark blue where the shadows would be. Give the impression of a shadow. And as I said, you could always work with thinner paints and more in-betweens to make less of a stark, less obvious transition. This is for working with beginners. The most basic. Something that you can maybe want to teach your child. A young child. We can do it this way. Now, kneecap like this, basically all gets covered. Except for maybe the lowest bottom edge. And I'm using Magic Blue just because it's more intense, like the blue there. And there's a panel here. Little dot there. And since this part has recesses that we can actually work around, we just don't go into the recesses. And we paint around, leaving a nice dark outline. Do you see that? And you can do that all over. By doing this, you create a little extra depth for the figure. You can also do it this way, like I am. And sometimes you're going to just need to do multiple layers in certain places to get a solid color. But by doing that, what I'm showing you, you're creating the illusion of shadow and the illusion of depth. Or at least enhancing the depth. That's already there. The thing you could do is you could use a slightly darker color and do this more than once if you want. And do it in smaller areas each time you do it. And what you would do then is build it up like this. Get your solid coat done with the Magic Blue or whatever you're using. I mean, you can take the Imperial Blue and mix white into it if you want. You wanted to go that route. Completely viable option. But when you're done with this, and I don't usually paint like this, as I said, I'm doing this to teach. Another option you have, though. I keep repeating myself there. But do this. And maybe just like a couple more steps, do an in between or something. And then do this and just do it in smaller areas or towards the centers. So let's say I took my electric blue, since I still have some on the palette, and I wanted to do that as my next layer. And what we would do is we'd leave it doesn't have to be that large. It could be smaller. You could have just done the top. Like, you could have just done down here. Like this. And then the top. Like this. A little bit. I said, or you could have done it to the center, too, and let the outside darker in. That's just personal taste at that point. And what you could do after this, after you do something like that, is you can take another one of your shades. And I'm going to use a different one. I'm going to use this blue shade from Vallejo. Now, if you had an ink, you could use an ink too. An ink works perfectly fine, especially for these more heavier transitions. In fact, I would recommend an ink. But you can take this shade and apply it heavily over an area like this. Like it's a glaze almost. And you might even want to do it 1 or 2 times after it dries. But depending on how you did this, you could use this. And then you don't have to do this. This is optional. As a way of hiding the transition a little bit and making it smoother. You can do it up here. Not that it mattered as much up there, but it's an option. Or if you liked it the way before, you could have left it like that. It's up to you. But it's a different method. So we've done dry brushing, we've done the edge highlighting, we've done layering up the shadow and showing you different ways of doing that. I'm going to show you very quickly how to do gold. Because I was only planning on this for about an hour, and we have about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to take some Game Color Glorious Gold. Let's see. Take my nice brush again, and if you are painting a lot of guys, and this isn't your last step, you want to get yourself some new water, or a different thing of water, or some new water. And for Ultramarines, it's their shoulder pad outlining that's gold. At least for most of them. Just as long as you try to be careful. And I can fully admit I could be a lot more careful right now. However, I'm also just trying to quickly teach you. So, let's see. And I'm only going to show you one method of doing this today. Okay. Though I fully admit you're probably going to want at least 2 layers of this to get decent coverage. Because just metallic paints don't have the best coverage in the world. Sorry if I was off screen. But that's two coats. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Vallejo Monocolor Silver. This is a really, 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 really bright silver color. And get that on my palette. Now you have the option. Now I'm going to actually mix this with my glorious gold. Get a very silvery gold color. I'm going to thin it down a bit with water. Okay. I don't know if you can see that on my brush, but that's a lot brighter than it had been. Okay. I'm bringing up to the peaks. And the peak outside of the shoulder pad as well. And just make it a really bright highlight there at the top. Or you could always just do the edge highlighting like I showed you before. Just build it up a little bit. It'll be a nice bright spot. And then if you want to take that one step further, you can just take pure silver at that point. A little bit thin down and just put it right in the center. Or again on the edges, the like really, really extreme. Down the center, there. I'm just going back with the mixed color a little bit and smoothing it out. Now that's for the bright parts. Now, I'm going to show you just a really, really simple way of making it a little bit more depth, a little bit warmer if you want. And I'm taking, this is an actual ink, this is Game Ink Skin Wash. And Skin Wash is a really, really warm tone to it. Warm orangey tone to it. I'm thinning it down with just water to a glaze consistency, and I get most of it off my brush, so I don't need a lot of it. And you can just go over the whole thing just very lightly, pulling down towards the parts you didn't highlight. So you can start at the center here and work that way, and then work that way. And pull your brush off at the corners or at the bottoms, wherever you're working in. And that won't take away the luster of the gold too much, but it will give a little bit of extra depth and tinge and redness to it, just in the corners and a little bit over the overall. Oh, no, I've lost him. See, is it down here? Again, because I'm moving around a bit, I've been wiping off some of the stuff and unintentionally, and it's just doesn't make it look as good as if you were doing it all on your own. The right way. But those are some really basic beginner's techniques that you can employ to paint an ultramarine. As I said, as long as you're being more careful than I am, because you're not going to be jumping around all different parts of the model like I just did. But anyways, that is basically all I had to teach today. And I can do probably about 10 minutes of Q&A if anyone has any questions. I'll wait a couple minutes. If there's no questions, then I'm going to go offline. I have other things I need to get done, like I have to have dinner. But while I wait, as I said, next week the class is painting bigger models, and we're going to be employing different types of different dry brushing for things like the wing here, and the feathers, and the fur of the body. And I'm just going to show you a few different techniques to get this guy painted. This would be more concentrated as far as the techniques go. Pardon me. A little bit more concentrated as far as the techniques go, because I'm going to keep what we're doing pretty standard to this guy. So he's going to have a very standardized, and it's going to be a little bit more advanced, and we're going to definitely go for something more advanced than what we did with this guy, because because he's got a whole bunch of different things on him anyways. He's going to look ugly. He's not finished either, so that he always has that working against him. And I wasn't the most careful in the world as I could have been. But as I said, different techniques, take away what you want. You can always improve upon them, and next week we're going to improve upon some of them with this guy. And I don't think there's going to be any questions. If you're on YouTube, thank you for watching. I hope this is helpful to at least some people. And there should be a primer within the next couple days for next week's class as to what you're going to need as far as materials go, different types of paint, and a paint list as well. I'm just teaching a griffin. You can bring any type of monster you want in appropriate colors. So there's to look forward to that. And then there's 4 other classes. I believe the following week after the monster, or in larger figures. I'm calling it painting larger figures for beginners. The following week is going to be beginner's pre-shading. It's going to be teaching you how to use shading and shades as a tool to speed up your painting. And I don't mean just like what I did there. I mean other methods of doing it. Also improving your capability of understanding shadow, and as well as tinting, things like that. And then the following week after that is for the 4th class is going to be painting veils for beginners, and I will show you on this rhino. I know it's an old rhino. It's in really rough shape, but it's a good, if you have something like this, something that's in really rough shape and older, and you don't care that much about, or you've salvaged from something else, it's a really good starting point for learning things like this. And I'll show you techniques for doing larger models like this, especially, and things that are specifically good for vehicles. And then after that, the following week after that is going to be just painting different types of flesh. I'll show you probably orcs and humans or something along that line. Just showing you a few different styles of painting flesh and how you figure out highlights and stuff on flesh. And again, as we move through this next few weeks, it's going to be more advanced stuff, and it's going to be better painting without getting into the intermediate and more expert levels. So still beginner stuff. It's just going to be helping you to advance your capabilities and expand upon what we've already learned and things like that. And then the final one is going to be a specialty class in which we're going to be doing weathering on that rhino that we're going to be painting in week 4. So thank you all once again. I hope you enjoyed and at least learned a little bit of something today. As I said, this is just purely for beginners, the very, very start of people who've maybe never picked up a paintbrush before or are artistically inclined. So please don't be too harsh in your criticisms of me. I am usually far, far better than that. I can give you some examples. Or this guy looks much better than that. I would like to hope, but until next week, or if you're catching me working on my commission during the week, I can't wait to see you there. And thank you. And